Welcome to Episode 3. In the Anglo-Saxon period, the geld or property tax was first levied in response to Danish invasions but later became a regular tax. The majority of the king's income derived from the royal domain and the annual farm from each shire, the fixed sum paid by sheriffs for the privilege of administering and profiting from royal lands. Kings also made income from judicial fines and regulation of trade. 56. People owed the king service in the form of the trino de necessitas, FYRD service, burh building, and bridge building. After the conquest of 1066, the Normans continued collecting the geld regularly. They also introduced new sources of revenue based on concepts of feudalism. The king was entitled to collect a feudal aid when his eldest son was knighted, his eldest daughter married, or if the king needed to pay his own ransom. The heir to a fief was also required to pay the king a feudal relief before he could take possession of his inheritance. The king was also entitled to his vassals' military service, but vassals could pay scutage instead. Military. Edit. Main articles: English Army and History of the Royal Navy, before 1707. In the Anglo-Saxon period, England had no standing army. The king and magnates retained professional household troops, see housecarl, and all freemen were obligated to perform military service in the FYRD. In addition, holders of bookland were obligated to provide a certain number of men based on the number of hides they owned. After the Norman conquest, the king's household troops remained central to any royal army. The Anglo-Saxon FYRD also remained in use. But the Normans also introduced a new feudal element to the English military. The king's tenants-in-chief, his feudal barons, were obligated to provide mounted knights for service in the royal army or to garrison royal castles. The total number of knights owed was called the servitium debitum, Latin, service owed, and historian Richard Huscroft estimates this number was around 5,000. In reality, the servitium debitum was greater than any king would actually need in wartime. Its main purpose was for assessing how much scutage the king was owed. Scutage was used to pay for mercenaries, which were an important part of any Norman army. The Kingdom of England emerged from the gradual unification of the early medieval Anglo-Saxon kingdoms known as the Heptarchy: East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, Kent, Essex, Sussex, and Wessex. The Viking invasions of the 9th century upset the balance of power between the English kingdoms, and native Anglo-Saxon life in general. The English lands were unified in the 10th century in a reconquest completed by King Aethelstan in 927. During the Heptarchy, the most powerful king among the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms might become acknowledged as Bretwalda, a high king over the other kings. The decline of Mercia allowed Wessex to become more powerful, absorbing the kingdoms of Kent and Sussex in 825. The kings of Wessex increasingly dominated the other kingdoms of England during the 9th century. In 827, Northumbria submitted to Egbert of Wessex at Dor, briefly making Egbert the first king to reign over a united England. In 886, Alfred the Great retook London, which he apparently regarded as a turning point in his reign. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says that all of the English people, all Angelson, not subject to the Danes, submitted themselves to King Alfred. Asser added that Alfred, king of the Anglo-Saxons, restored the city of London splendidly, and made it habitable once more. 14. Alfred's restoration entailed reoccupying and refurbishing the nearly deserted Roman walled city, building quays along the Thames, and laying a new city street plan. During the following years, Northumbria repeatedly changed hands between the English kings and the Norwegian invaders, but was definitively brought under English control by Edred in 954, completing the unification of England. At about this time, Lothian, a portion of the northern half of Northumbria, Bernicia, was ceded to the Kingdom of Scotland. On 12 July 927, the monarchs of Britain gathered at Emont in Cumbria to recognize Aethelstan as King of the English. The title, King of the English, or Rex Anglorum in Latin, was first used to describe Aethelstan in one of his charters in 928. The standard title for monarchs from Aethelstan until John was King of the English. Episode 4 will be continued.